You're looking at the same tree you walked past 1,000 times, but suddenly it's the most extraordinary thing in the universe. The tree is exactly the same, but something shifted in how you're seeing it. Your mind may want to categorize this kind of shift as supernatural, but it's actually the natural unfolding of awareness that mental noise has been covering over. What actually changes when this happens? This isn't about becoming special or gaining mystical powers. It's about seeing what you've been missing your entire life. The filter that made everything seem separate and complicated starts dissolving, and suddenly you're experiencing reality directly instead of through the constant commentary in your head. Most people mistake their thoughts about reality for reality itself, but when consciousness expands, the confusion begins to clear. Before we continue, if you're ready to break free from the repeating patterns that hold you back, check out my free guide, 5 Inner Blocks That Keep You from Deep Spiritual Growth. The link is waiting for you in the top comment below. The first thing you notice is that the conceptual layer between you and experience starts dissolving. You stop living through mental commentary and start experiencing life directly. It's like the difference between reading about swimming and actually jumping into the water. What seemed complex becomes elegantly simple. Not because you're dumbing it down, but because you're seeing the essence without all the mental interference. It's like the difference between knowing about a tree and actually seeing the tree without your mind chattering about what trees are for, what type it is, or how it fits into your reality. Children naturally start out with this kind of direct seeing. It's only later that we train them out of it. Watch a child discover a puddle or a butterfly. They're completely absorbed, completely present. They haven't learned to substitute ideas about things for the actual experience of things. But then we educate them. We teach them to live in their heads, to analyze everything, to think about the past and the future instead of being here, now. Gradually that direct seeing fades away, and they join the rest of us in this collective trance of living through thoughts instead of through reality. When consciousness expands, you break out of that trance. You realize you've been looking at photographs of the ocean your whole life and thinking you knew what water was. Then suddenly you're standing in the waves and they're crashing over you, and you think, this is nothing like the photographs. Most people are walking around hypnotized by words, by concepts, by their own thoughts. They think their thoughts about reality are reality. But the expanded awareness sees through this. You discover that the voice in your head commenting on everything isn't you. It's something happening within your awareness. Ordinary moments become vivid and immediate. You're washing dishes and suddenly the warm water on your hands, the soap bubbles catching light, the simple rhythm of the task becomes absolutely fascinating. Not because anything changed about washing dishes, but because you're finally experiencing it without the voice in your head telling you how boring it is. This direct perception isn't something you achieve through effort or practice. It's something that was always there, waiting, underneath the noise. When the mental chatter starts quieting down, what was hidden becomes as obvious as sunlight streaming through your window in the morning. You begin to see that most of what you called problems were actually just thoughts about situations, not the situations themselves. The situation is what it is. The suffering comes from the story your mind tells about it. When you experience things directly without the story, even difficult circumstances lose their power to disturb your peace. This is when you realize you've been living in a kind of virtual reality your entire life, mistaking the simulation for what's actually here. The expanded consciousness doesn't add anything new. It simply removes what was never real to begin with. The second shift is discovering who's actually doing the perceiving. You realize you can watch your thoughts, which means you can't be your thoughts. The voice in your head becomes something you observe rather than something you are. This isn't disassociation or detachment from life, it's recognizing the awareness that was always there, quietly witnessing everything that comes and goes. You've been so identified with the mental commentary that you forgot about the one who's listening to it all. Think about it this way. You can be aware of your thoughts. You can watch them come and go like clouds passing through the sky. So if you can observe your thoughts, you can't be your thoughts, can you? That which observes is not the observed. You discover you're the awareness in which everything arises. Thoughts, feelings, sensations, the whole world appears within this spacious consciousness that you are. You're not a separate self trapped in a body, but consciousness in which everything appears. The boundary between inner and outer becomes arbitrary. When you breathe in, the air becomes you. When you breathe out, you become the air. Where do you and the world begin? We draw that line for convenience, but nature doesn't actually recognize it. This brings a profound shift in how you understand yourself. You're not a thing inside the universe, you are the consciousness in which the universe appears. Not in some grandiose, egotistical sense, it's quite the opposite. It's the dissolution of the ego, the realization that what you really are is much more fundamental than this little character you've been playing. That feeling of being a separate self trapped inside your body dissolves. You see through the illusion of being a separate agent making decisions. In reality, you're being lived by the universe, just as a wave is being waved by the ocean. The controller and the controlled are one. You are what the universe is doing at this particular point in space and time. This might sound terrifying at first. People think if they're not in control, then what happens to their life? But this is still thinking in terms of separation. The universe isn't forcing you to do anything. There is a tremendous relief in this recognition. All that anxiety about whether you're making the right choices falls away because you realize the intelligence that's moving through you is the same intelligence that orchestrates the entire cosmos. Understanding deepens because you're no longer limited to the narrow bandwidth of ordinary thinking. The same intelligence that turns caterpillars into butterflies and makes flowers bloom is the intelligence operating through you. You don't have to figure everything out anymore. The knowing emerges spontaneously from a deeper source. Knowledge and integration happen effortlessly because you're no longer fighting in the natural flow of life. What once required struggle and analysis now unfolds with elegant simplicity. You discover what consciousness is fundamental to the universe, not something that appeared as an afterthought in biological evolution. This isn't about gaining special powers or mystical abilities. It's about recognizing what was always true. You've always been this awareness. You just got confused and thought you were the thoughts appearing within it. The third transformation is that empathy starts flowing naturally. You begin feeling what others feel without trying or forcing compassion. This isn't emotional overwhelm or taking on other people's pain. It's recognizing the shared consciousness beneath apparent separation. You see through people's defenses to the truth of what they're experiencing. Their pain becomes as obvious as their joy because you're no longer seeing them as separate from yourself. When you realize you're not separate from the world, harming others becomes like cutting off your own hand. It's obviously against your interest. This isn't morality imposed from outside by religious rules or social conditioning. It's simply intelligent self-interest once you understand what yourself actually is. You can't help but treat the world differently when you see that you're not separate from it. You start seeing the unity of all things. Not unity in some vague mystical sense, but the actual literal fact that everything is interconnected. You can't have up without down. You can't have self without other. You can't have life without death. These aren't separate things that occasionally interact. They're aspects of a single unified process unfolding. Life becomes simple because you're no longer fighting reality. You're no longer trying to make things be different than they are. What seemed complicated reveals itself as elegantly simple, not through reduction or oversimplification, but through clarity that sees the essence directly. You realize you're not controlling your life the way you thought you were. You can't make a mistake because you're not separate from the process that's unfolding. You can't do anything other than what you do because you're not separate from the power that's doing it. This doesn't make you passive or irresponsible. It makes you spontaneous, natural, free to respond authentically to whatever arises. You stop second-guessing yourself because you recognize the intelligence flowing through you is trustworthy. Problems don't disappear, but they lose their powers to disturb your fundamental peace. Pain is still felt when it arises, but there is no suffering added to it by resistance. Joy is experienced more fully because there is no fear of losing it. Life becomes play, a cosmic dance, where you're both the dancer and the dance itself. Before we wrap up, if you found this helpful and want to go deeper, remember that free download I mentioned, 5 inner blocks that keep you from deep spiritual growth. The link is waiting for you in the top comment below. These shifts happen naturally when you stop forcing and start allowing. Nobody can teach you what you already know. Trust what you're experiencing, even when it defies explanation. The beautiful thing is that these moments of expanded awareness don't require any special preparation or spiritual achievement. They can happen while you're washing dishes, walking down the street, or sitting in traffic. The consciousness that recognizes itself doesn't need perfect conditions. It just needs you to stop trying so hard to make something happen. What if you're already exactly where you need to be? What if the awareness hearing these words right now is the same awareness that moves the stars and grows the trees? You're not separate from the intelligence that orchestrates the entire cosmos. You are that intelligence, temporarily forgetting itself and then remembering again.